What are the three fundamental needs that men need for women to find them attractive, and that women need for men to find them attractive? Stick around and let's chat about it today on this episode of Christian Date Coach. Let's hit it. What's up, everybody? My name is Dr. Phoenix Singh. I want to warmly welcome you to this episode of Christian Date Coach. As always, it's a blessing to have you here with us. Please do feel free, if you enjoyed this video, to click that like button, subscribe to our channel, hit that bell so you get notifications every time we post new original content, and also feel free to share this video with your friends as well as with your congregation. Make sure to feel free to contribute to the conversation below in the comments section as well. Because today we're going to be talking about a topic that I'm very, very passionate about, that I've been trying to get my head around for a very long time, insofar as how is it that we can take the peer-reviewed research literature, the neuroscience literature, the social psychology literature, the anthropological literature, evolutionary psych, combine all of it together. These are literatures with hundreds of thousands of papers, right? How is it that we can essentially assemble all of the available knowledge together and be able to essentially summarize it in a way that is simple, that is parsimonious, but is also practically helpful to single Christians, as well as to individuals who are in relationships and married as well. And of course, this information is not only relevant to Christians, but that's my audience. And so I hope that you find it helpful. So women have three fundamental needs, and these three fundamental needs all center around the topic of security. Now, men also have three fundamental needs, and men's fundamental needs focus on stability. Okay, so let's go ahead, and the first thing I want to talk about are women's three fundamental needs. Right? There's a dramatic amount of research literature to be able to support all three of these. Same thing for the men's three needs when it comes to stability. The first kind of security is physical security. Now, important to be able to point out is that for all of these, it is the perception of these three things, not the real thing, okay? I'm not saying that, like, let's put it this way, right? Women want to feel, guys, okay, I'm talking to you right now, right? Women want to feel like if a mugger runs up to you on the street, right, with a gun, that you're not going to be 2 blocks that way and have taken your wallet and thrown it at her, and you're, booking it down the street, and in the meanwhile, she's got to deal with the guy, right? Now, God forbid you ever are in that situation, okay? You don't have to be in that situation and be able to, beat up a mugger or something to be able to make her feel physically secure, but she wants the perception with you that she feels physically safe, that she feels physically secure. Now, everything in terms of attraction, the overwhelming preponderance of things are proxies that essentially represent in some way, shape, or form these three different kinds of security. And one of the best examples is height, right? Height as being a proxy for physical security, okay? I work with a lot of clients, I work with a lot of guys, and some guys that I work with are not the tallest guys. Right? So for example, everybody talks about, 6 foot, gotta be 6 foot and above. It's this totally arbitrary number, right? But hey, listen, it's a nice bookend, right? 6'0", okay. If somebody says they're 6 foot, they're relatively tall, right? If you say 5'9.5", you don't even know what to conceptualize, right? So it's kind of this cultural thing. People say 6 foot, everybody knows what it means. Now, at the end of the day, only 14% of men in the United States are over 6 foot, right? Now, if you end up drilling down on that 14% to be able to say, okay, well, how many of them are, age appropriate? How many of them are single? How many of them are college educated, or whatever else you've got on your list, right? You're essentially just immediately screening out 86% of all men, right? Now, men do this as well on all kinds of things, right? But ladies, I'm talking to you on this one, right? When it comes to the height thing, it's just important to understand that, statistically, sometimes when we've got our list of our, must-haves and can't-stands, it's really helpful to be able to take a look at things like census data even, to be able to get a sense of exactly what we have to work with statistically in the first place, right? So at the end of the day, it's really not possible that only men who are 6 foot and above or whatever can provide this sense of security. So why is it that men who are tall end up kind of, giving off that sense. And there's a lot of very sensible reasons. There is nothing wrong with being attracted to tall men, right? Now, at the end of the day, usually my rule of thumb is to be able to say, okay, minimum 3 inches taller, right? Now, my father is shorter than my mother. I know many happy couples where we've got the same height, or 1 inch taller, 2 inches taller, etc. But if somebody tells me that height is very important to them, I always say 3 inches and taller, so this way you can wear 3-inch heels if that's what you're into, if that's what you like to do. If you don't like heels, then don't wear the heels, fine, right? But at the end of the day, there's certain reasons why being taller provides a lot of evolutionary adaptational benefits. So certain things, for example, like, hey, if you're taller, you can see further out over the horizon, for both predators or whatever to be able to keep your family safe, but also for prey to be able to go out and bring the proverbial bacon home. Or in this case, maybe you're hunting wild pigs or something, it's the literal bacon, whatever, right? So that's number one. Number two is that usually when you're taller, if you take a look at the proportion of your limbs, first of all, your legs are usually going to be longer in the aggregate if you're taller, and so because of that, you're going to be able to run further distances, more endurance, faster, etc. in the aggregate, right? Same thing in terms of the lengths of your arms, right? If my arms end up being longer than if I end up getting into a fight with somebody else, right, then obviously I have the greater reach, I also have the advantage. So when it comes to survival and replication, all signs point to survival being easier for individuals who are taller. Now, interestingly, if you end up taking a look at the curve, what you end up seeing is that men over a certain height, really 6'4" is kind of this optimized height. After that, you end up seeing a steep drop-off, right, in terms of the perceived attraction of taller men. So it's not that, the taller you are, the better it gets. There's kind of this parabolic distribution, this inverted parabolic distribution. That's what you end up seeing in the literature, right? So that's number one, right? The second thing to be able to keep in mind, right, is that when it comes to not just survival and replication, right, but when it comes to our bodies and how they're programmed, something very special happens when we look up. Okay, so really kind of, if you think about kind of our auditory system, right? So here we go. We'll go sideways, so I'll give you a nice profile, right? So here we go. In terms of my auditory, this is the pinna, right? So if you have noise or whatever, you have sound, it's coming into the pinna, right? And then it's going through, right, the hammer, the anvil, and the stapes. It's going into the cochlea. All of a sudden, this is going or whatever, and it's telling my brain what's going on in terms of sound, right? There's a little area kind of above it, right? And inside here, right, is an area. It's a system itself. It's called the vestibular system. Right, so if you've ever had a situation where you get like vertigo, where like the world is spinning, or these things, or seasickness is a great example. If you've ever been incredibly tired during a workshop, a lecture, a training at work, and you start to get really tired, and then your head pops back up, right? That is because of the vestibular system, right? It basically keeps us properly oriented. It keeps the spine erect. It keeps, us looking straight forward. We're not meant to be walking around like this or whatever all day, and we're not meant to be walking around like this all day, right? We're kind of properly oriented, right? Also not side to side, right? And all of these different dimensions, right, side to side, up and down, etc., is all coded by our vestibular system. Right? So something very interesting happens in the vestibular system. There are these things called vestibular sacs. They literally look like little sacs, right? And inside they got these little crystals. And the crystals activate these receptors within the sacs. Now, I'm sure you've had a situation, I wish I had like a bowl or a glass or something here, right? Well, let's say that I took a bunch of marbles and I put it into a glass and I turned it sideways like this, and then I slowly rotate the glass. Right? I'm sure you would understand what I mean when I say the marbles are going to stay at the bottom of the glass even when I rotate the glass itself, right? It's the same thing with the vestibular sacs, right? The crystals basically stay where they are, right? But as I move around, right, those crystals, just like with the marbles in the glass, are touching different parts of the sac, and because of that, it gives us different sensations. Okay? And so obviously, if we're going like this, the crystals are touching a different part of the sac, and at a certain point, it triggers something which basically says you're falling, and it triggers you to shoot your head back up. This is why you end up getting that effect, okay? So it's very interesting that when we look up, right, that is something that is stimulating, because we are meant, the vestibular sacs are meant to keep us straight forward. So if we look up, it is literally stimulating for us, right, to be looking up. So if you say, oh, hey, the guy's tall, hey, I'm very attracted or whatever, right, to this guy because he's very tall. I don't know, there's just something about him, etc. Because everybody, first of all, in relationships, all of us want to look up to our partner, right? We all, proverbially want to look up to our partner, right? And in this case, we're literally looking up to our partner, right? Like physically looking up. The other way to be able to see this in terms of, you may say, well, yeah, Dr. Singh, but how about like looking down, Phoenix? Isn't that the exact same thing, right? Well, here's what I want you to try, right? So looking down is almost like a micro bow, and bows are a form of kind of submission or supplication, right? So here's what I want you to do. Next time you go out and you're seeing friends in these things, right? And you know how when you say hi, usually you kind of like do your head like this, or whatever, you say, hey man, how you doing? Right, a little dip down or dip up, whatever it is. I want you to try both of those, right? But consciously do it. Consciously, for half of the people or whatever, I put the head down, and for the other half, put the head up. What you're going to find is that when you actually raise your head, right, you're like, hey, what's going on, man? Right? When you do that, right, what is going to end up happening is that the stimulation that you end up experiencing, it will phenomenologically be experienced as a much more positive emotion, right? Give it a shot. See, don't just trust me or whatever. Go and try these things out. It's very important, right? But with all of this, right, you can imagine that if your partner is taller, right, you're going to constantly be having that experience when you're looking at them. And obviously somebody who's taller is going to make you feel smaller, right? This kicks off all kind of protective, protector, protectee, right, sorts of dynamics or whatever, dyadic relationship ideals, right, that shoot off. They're evolutionarily based in us when it comes to survival and replication. So because of that, it makes perfect sense or whatever that we would find a taller guy more attractive, right? It is a proxy for physical security at the end of the day, okay? But there are loads of things that are proxies for everything, right? And we'll get into some more, right? But at the end of the day, that's number one, right? Is the perception of physical security. You don't have to be a tall guy. You don't have to have a six-pack. You don't have to be, like jacked up, going to the gym for 3 hours today, okay? You don't need those things. As you'll hear me say in other videos on these channels to men, guys, listen carefully. You don't have to be George Clooney and you don't have to be Brad Pitt. I want you to have 4 things though, okay? Number 1 is I want you to be well-dressed for your body type, okay? Don't buy, 50 shirts or whatever because they're on sale. Buy 5 shirts of exceptional quality, right? If you don't know what you're doing, there are so many fashion consultants out there who can help you, okay? I've got a great fashion consultant, right? Now, he didn't recommend this particular suit. I love this suit, right? But he's the one who first got me into actually understanding fashion and these sorts of things and knowing what I was doing. I didn't just naturally know that. And growing up, I didn't have anybody teach me. It's a huge blessing. There's no weakness reaching out to other men to be able to get assistance, right? So that's number 1, okay? Number 2 is that I want you to be in good shape, right? Somebody once told me that there's nothing more fashionable than a physically fit body. And I gotta agree with that. Hey, listen, you're talking to a guy who's lost like 70 pounds over the last 3 years. Okay, I went from like 44% body fat to now I'm at I think 12.8% body fat or something, right? A huge difference, right? I feel different, I look different, I feel fantastic, best shape of my life, right? And it's one of these things where it does tremendous things for you, and yeah, it's more, women are going to be more attracted to you, right? It's an evolutionary prerogative. At the end of the day. It has nothing to do with body positivity, has nothing to do with body shaming or anything like this, right? These are evolved triggers, and culture may be shifting or whatever in terms of body positivity and these things, but I can tell you what, we're not going to overcome evolutionary mechanisms in the next 3 to 5 years. That's not going to happen, right? So think about what you can focus on, what you can focus on in terms of what we can consciously change, right? And that's one thing that we actually have control over, right, is our physical fitness and our physical health. Okay. Now, in addition to that, right, I want you to make sure that you're well groomed. And finally, the 4th one is that you got good hygiene. All things that you can do. Okay. And these are all things that at the end of the day are going to make you significantly more attractive to the opposite sex as men. Okay. In any case, right? Physical security. The second of the 3 fundamentals is emotional security. The way that I have described it in the past to people where they just, something goes off, they're like, I get it, yeah, that makes sense, right? And I agree with that in terms of women telling me this, right? is essentially like the maypole dance. Everybody remember the maypole, right? So you got kind of like this sturdy, solid pole or whatever, right? It's got all these kind of streamers or whatever coming off of it. And usually, you know, we're in Nordic countries and these sorts of things, Germanic countries or whatever have, you know, the maypole. And essentially what happens is that usually it's women or whatever kind of like dancing around the maypole, etc., right? But the idea here being that the man in the relationship, if he provides the perception, you don't always have to be some like stoic emotionalist guy or something like that. That is not healthy, right? But at the same time, you don't want to be a guy who's just absolutely all over the place, right? Your woman wants you to understand that at the end of the day, she's looking for somebody where she can open herself emotionally to you in a way that you're not going to go booking it 2 blocks down, right? When she reveals something to you, when she tells you how she's feeling. You know, men don't cycle biologically, women cycle, right? And it's the most beautiful thing, right? In terms of the ovulatory cycle, it's the most beautiful thing. And when you take a look at the shifts between different levels of testosterone and different levels of estrogen, and women's bodies are absolutely phenomenal things, just amazing, right? It's so beautiful. And what happens is that because of that, some guys get really perplexed because guys don't cycle, right? We get perplexed at a lot of things, trust me on this, right? And this is one of them. So what ends up happening, right, is that women are deeply trying to find someone who, in their natural, beautiful cycles, etc., right? Somebody who is able to be an anchor, right? Somebody who is able to be strong, who's able to be steady, right? And who is able to make them have that feeling of emotional security, right? It is the emotional component of number 1, which is physical security, right? And then finally, the third one is resource security, okay? Now, why on earth would resources kind of be important, right? Well, remember that we're evolved to like hunter-gatherer times. We're not evolved to kind of contemporary society. We're not evolved to 1960 and the pill. We're not evolved to, movements in Nordic countries in terms of, equal pay, these sorts of things. We're not evolved to that, right? What we're evolved to, right, is total lack of birth control, right? And because of that, right, women for many months of the year, 9 months of, on average, per year would end up being pregnant, right? And so if they have a mate. And so because of that, right, one of the things that happens when you have larger hips, and women in the aggregate have wider hips than men, is that women end up having a more difficult time running relative to the aggregate of men. Obviously not every individual, don't jump on me about it, right? But in the aggregate, that's what you end up finding. And wider hips make it more difficult to run, right? Particularly to be able to, incredibly fast sprints, etc., right? And so what you end up seeing, right, is that guys or whatever, though, because, we do not bear that burden of gestation. It's not a burden in a bad way, right? But the cost of gestation is higher for women. What ends up happening is that the guys, they're the ones who are expected, because of that, to be able to go out and to be able to, get the resources and to be able to bring them back to their partner who is working on literally baking the next generation. I mean, how phenomenal is that, right? And so because of all of this, right, that is what we're evolved to. That's what we're adapted to. And biologically, this is something that hits certain triggers deep within us that are difficult to be able to understand. And so because of that, what you end up finding is that it used to be that the concept of a resource was literally, food or, animal pelts to be able to keep warm. How many goats do you have in your flock? And these sorts of things, right? And so everything is a proxy. The proxy for those sorts of things these days is fiat currency, which is, money, right? Which can basically be traded for those sorts of things, for food, for, goats, right? For whatever, right? But that's the idea. And so at the end of the day, it's very important, not only that I point out, but it's also something that I firmly understand, right? I mean, culture's completely shifted, right? And we're by no means perfect, but it's certainly gotten to the stage now where, like, I have an older sister. My older sister doesn't need anybody, right? She doesn't need a man to be able to be financially secure. She's phenomenal with money, and she's very, very secure in it. She doesn't need it, right? But this doesn't mean that it's no longer a trigger, because we're evolved to it. Culture, the law, etc. moves far faster than hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, okay? And if you don't believe in biological evolution, social evolution, right? Fine. right? Been taking as many thousands of years as you believe that the world has existed, okay? Personally, biological evolution, my opinion, okay? So, what happens because of that, right, is in terms of relationships and such, right, women find it attractive if, and this is what I tell women, right, or this is what I ask for you, if you're a female listener, to be able to consider with me, right? No, okay, you do not need a man to be able to take care of you financially. You don't, right? Would it be nice if, God forbid, something happened, right? Something really bad happened and you were unable to work, right? You fell down the stairs or whatever, broke every bone in your body, got some horrible illness, and I pray that this does not happen to you, right? But God forbid something like that happened. Would it be attractive that your partner, right, without batting an eye, would still be able to financially take care of everything, and it wouldn't be a problem, right? I have not met one woman who has told me that that is not an attractive quality, or that that is a neutrally attractive quality. That is something that's attractive, right? So at the end of the day, a lot of people end up saying very inappropriate things in terms of, women are only after money, or women are gold diggers, and these sorts of things. And this is just absolute foolishness, right? To say these sorts of things, right? And it's just, guys, come on, right? At the end of the day, though, it is a biological trigger, right, to be attracted to individuals, to men who have more resources, right? And this is why, you'll end up having, locker room talk or whatever of a whole bunch of guys or whatever saying, she's the most beautiful woman alive or whatever. She works at, whatever fast food place or whatever, but, so gorgeous, da 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 da. And other guys will be like, oh, terrific, da 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 da. But you will not see the opposite, right? You will not see groups of women having locker room talk or whatever and saying he's gorgeous, he's so incredibly handsome, but he's flat broke, lives with his parents or whatever, and he's got no ambition. Right? You don't see them. That's just not a thing. That is a double standard, but this isn't a double standard like some societally, socially constructed double standard, right? We're talking about biologically evolved mechanisms which manifest themselves psychologically. Okay, that is what this is here, right? So those are the three different fundamentals there, right? In terms of what a man needs to have for women to find them attractive. And guys, listen, there are so many ways to be able to deal with these. And when I say deal with them, what I mean is to be able to make yourself more attractive. There's behavioral economics studies that some guys point out to me, and they get real frustrated because what they find is that the shorter you are, so let's say that you're a little over 5 foot, you're going to need to make at least $200,000 a year more to be perceived as baseline physically attractive as a man who is earning an average salary who's 6 foot tall. And guys get very angry at this, right? I mean, I can't tell you the number of calls that I've gotten and questions that I've had and young men that I've sat down with, but they happen to be shorter. Guys, if you're short, it's fine. It's really fine, right? The data that I just talked about there, right? A lot of people think, this is so incredibly unfair, etc. Listen to me very carefully. You have two choices, guys, okay? Option number one is you can sit around and you can play the victim card and act like a victim. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't blame you. Right? I'm not saying that you're wrong to act like, this is unfair and unjust and that you deserve love as much as everybody else. I'm not telling you that that's wrong. What I am telling you, though, right, is that the second option, right, research has already found works. If you want to be perceived as physically attractive as a 6 foot man, the answer is you should go and start earning and saving money, right? Go and start your own company, build it, and try to flip it. Right? Now, I didn't do that because of height, but that's what I did, right? You can also go and, start saving very aggressively, get some passive, revenue sources coming in and let that grow over time. Dividend stocks, real estate, you name it. There's so many different, options in terms of securities to invest in. That is another option for you, right? But at the end of the day, you can do something about it. All right, so it's on you to make that decision of which of those two you want. But I can tell you that if you choose the first one, you got a 0% chance of success. You sit around, you talk like a victim, you act like a victim, you hate women, these sorts of things. You got a 0 chance, okay? The other option, I am not going to tell you, nobody could tell you, right? That all of a sudden or whatever, you start making $500,000 a year, everybody's going to be throwing themselves at you. That is a lie, okay? But remember that at the end of the day here, attraction is like a roll of the dice, okay? I can't promise you, we're going to get, whatever the combination is you're looking to get when you roll dice. right? What I can promise you though, is that you're loading the dice. You're weighting the dice down in a way that is more favorable to you, okay? And that's a beautiful thing to be able to understand, okay? So that is what I would tell you. If you're a shorter guy, right? Hey, I'm what, 5'9", 5'10", right? It's one of these things where I'm not some massive guy or anything like that. Do I care? No, right? Just like I don't care about being bald, right? But it's one of these things where if you do really care, don't think that there's nothing you can do about it, okay? That's just one of many ways or whatever that you can deal with these sorts of things, all right? So that covers that side of the equation. Now, ladies, what is it that you need or whatever? What are the 3 fundamental things that men are looking for, right? That you can address through all kinds of different proxies yourselves to make yourself maximally attractive to men, right? So we focus on what the guys can do. Ladies, let's talk about what you can. So remember that we mentioned earlier that just as the 3 fundamental needs that women have for men to be able to fill, that those are security-based, right? Well, the opposite side, it's all about stability, ladies, okay? That is what we as men deeply desire, right, is stability, right? Now, in talking about men in general, right, especially in terms of kind of current events and these sorts of things, the terminology kind of gets thrown around and all and misinterpreted, right? So one great example of this is that because men deeply desire stability, right? And why do we desire stability? Because through stability, if things are stable, right, then we can predict things. For example, if we're in a tribe and the tribe's not moving anywhere, we start building, structures and these sorts of things. And, we domesticate some goats. I don't know what it is about goats today, but we domesticate some goats or whatever it is, right? We know where everything is. We know where the prey is. We know what the predators are locally. We know all of this information, right? Which is very helpful for us because then we feel a sense of control, okay? And if we feel a sense of control over our environment, right? Everything being predictable, etc., right? Then we feel dominant, right? And dominance is something that is very deeply important to men. And I think that it's very unfortunate that that domination has now become synonymous with the concept of subjugation, right? Such that if a man deeply desires to be dominant in his environment, that it suggests that he wants to literally put other people down, be it his partner, other people around him, whatever. He wants to dominate other human beings. He wants to subjugate them down. This is foolishness, okay? Men wanting to be dominant, wanting to rise in dominance hierarchies, etc., is a beautiful thing about men. It is something to be appreciated. It's something to be respected. It's something that we deeply desire support in and assistance with from our partner, right? Any kind of messaging that kind of comes to us, especially from our partner, about being wanting to do really well at work. We're working so hard at work and these sorts of things. The reason that we're doing it, right? And trust me, there's a lot of reasons meta-analytically, right? So what the research says in the aggregate is that men end up deriving significantly more happiness through work than through relationships. And for women, it's more through relationships than work. Again, aggregate level data, but across many, many research studies, right? These are meta-analytic findings, right? This is across the literature. And the reason why I mention this and all is because sometimes guys do a really bad job, right, of kind of disconnecting from work, right? Kind of like turning that off and then, turning on the home life, right? Sometimes really hard for us, right? But we also deeply desire for our partners to understand the reason that we're working so hard isn't just to kind of, like get our kicks and these sorts of things at work, but it's because we deeply desire to be worthy of you, right? We deeply desire your respect, right? So like Paul, for example, talked about how, husbands love your wives, wives respect your husbands, right? That is the basic situation, right? So if you take a look at surveys, for example, of men and women, what you end up seeing is that women say that they would much rather be in a relationship, right, where they know that they are loved, they feel deeply loved, right? Even if now and again, they don't feel respected, right? But they know that they're loved by their partner, right? Now, is that an ideal situation? Of course not, right? I understand, right? But for men, if you survey men, same question, right? Totally different response, right? Men would much rather be totally alone, right? And not be in a relationship, even if they know their partner loves them, right? If they are disrespected. Men do not desire unconditional love. We desire unconditional respect. It isn't, and this is respect when we don't deserve it. Because let me tell you, everybody does things where we do not deserve to be loved. We do not deserve to be respected. This is the true test of relationships, right? It's not always, happy, good, fluffy times and these things. That'd be nice, but it's not realistic, right? But it's important, ladies, that you understand that for us, it's the deepest desire of our heart to be worthy of you. That is our wound, right? Our deep wound from childhood, from our lives that we have is this question. And the question is, am I worthy? Okay, for women, the question is, am I loved? But for men, this question of am I worthy, it cuts so deep in us. So if we're not doing well at work, right, we don't feel worthy of your love. And if we don't feel worthy of your love, we don't even have the capacity to feel respected. Okay, and so because of that, we may go totally overboard at work. And then you may get frustrated, right? And saying, maybe your love language is quality time, like you don't see us, you don't love us, And guys, this is where we got to turn it on, right? Because here, we may think to ourselves, yeah, but come on, I'm doing all this work for you. You don't realize I'm doing it for you, Listen, women are wired differently than we are, okay? They're wired differently. We need to express unconditional love, okay? It is very important that we do that, okay? So, I know I'm saying okay a lot today as well. I think that's just a thing for me. Anyway, observation. So, these are the three different rules, though, okay? The three, not rules, but the three things or whatever, ladies, that if you understand this about men. Now, I'm not telling you that you have to like it, okay? And just like guys, I'm not telling you that you have to like that women are attracted to men who have resources, okay? I'm not telling you to like it, but I am telling you that it's how it is, okay? And the question is what you do with the information. You're welcome to ignore it. Of course you can, please, right? But it's one of these things where it's going to assist you quite a bit if you really understand this stuff and embrace it. Okay, so we desire three kinds of stability, okay? The first kind is attractive stability. Now, does that mean you need to be Heidi Klum or any of this nonsense? Of course not. Okay, just like guys don't have to be George Clooney. It would be nice. If you look like Kate Upton, that would be nice, right? I have a total crush on Kate Upton. She's gorgeous, right? That would be nice. But at the same time, it's unnecessary. So never think that, okay, about yourselves. But it's one of these things where the perception that men need to have here, right, is, you know what? Not only do I think that she's the most beautiful woman alive today, to me specifically, I don't really care if other people think that she's a 10. I think she's a 10, right? But I don't know how I can tell, but I have the perception that in 15 years, I'm going to be just as attracted to her, right? She's still going to be the most beautiful woman alive. Just to me, she's going to be the most beautiful woman alive, okay? So, this can be accomplished in a lot of different ways. Some people, for example, they do it through makeup. Some people do it through clothing. People do it through staying in phenomenal shape. People do it in all sorts of different ways, right? Now, some people are going to say it's unfortunate, but when you take a look at the survey literature, what you find is that men, right, experience a feeling of being loved more when they see their partner, their female partner, working on themselves physically. Even if the person's, let's say, maybe 100 pounds heavier, right, than what a healthy BMI would suggest, right? The person doesn't have to lose 100 pounds. Right? The sheer fact that their partner is putting effort in to be able to improve themselves physically makes men feel very deeply loved. Okay? Now, this is just what the survey literature said. Per usual, I'm just a vessel for the literature, right? Welcome to hate me if you want, right? But I don't care. So, second thing, right, in terms of stability, is emotional stability. And this one is very obvious. The way that I define emotional stability here is essentially that if let's say that I'm your boyfriend, right? And we're dating. We've been dating for a while, right? And I have a female coworker, right? She's going through a really hard time right now. And I mentioned, hey, she's having a really rough day today. And I was thinking maybe or whatever that I'll grab some coffee with her and chat with her for a little while. And you say, oh, honey, you're the best. You're so considerate, absolutely, right? And so you both hang up or whatever, right? Everything's fine. You come home, everything's normal, right? And then the next week or whatever, right? You mention something similar, and then all of a sudden you get very, very reactive, or you get, he'll perceive it as very, very, it may just be normal, right? But you get what he perceives to be unstably emotional, right? For whatever reason, right? This is something that really throws him off, and it's very, very unattractive to men, right? So it's very important that in terms of emotions, again, predictability, that's all we're looking for, right? Is predictability. Are we able to predict how you will react to pretty much the same phenomenon or whatever? In this case, you're talking to or meeting with a female coworker, right? But do we know how you're going to react? Because if we don't, it totally throws us off that we can't predict it, right? It just makes us feel out of control ourselves, which of course we don't like, right? So we find it very unattractive, okay? So that's number two, is emotional stability. And the third, so a lot of people would say, it's got to do with money, right? So here's one thing or whatever that's very important to understand, right? If you take a look at the social psychology and the evolutionary psych literature, you'll see a lot of phenomenal studies, very interesting studies. Studies for things like, for example, like a nice car, right? If you take a woman and you put her into a car, which is not a nice car, then you put her into a car that is a nice car, there is a non-significant relationship there in terms of other people, men are going to look at her and they don't really care about the car, they care about the woman, right? The car being nice or not nice is kind of arbitrary, we don't really care. Right? Having a woman in a nice car doesn't make her more attractive, right? Same thing if a woman has $10 million or whatever versus making, $75,000 per year. Of course, there's some men who are going to find that very attractive, but in the aggregate, it's not really going to do anything, right? And it's not because of the patriarchy, and it's not because of men holding women down. It's none of that, right? It is because of this third fundamental difference, right? So women have the trigger, right? The biological trigger, which has to do with resource security, right? Men have a biological trigger for the responsible allocation of capital, okay? Now, what that means is basically, if I have $100 in my pocket, right? And I trust my wife with it, what is my wife going to do with that $100? Okay, is she going to go and buy a whole bunch of things that we don't need? Is she going to invest it wisely? Is she going to, prioritize it in terms of, like what do we need right now? What have we budgeted, et cetera, right? The responsible allocation of capital is one of the sexiest things that exists, right? It genuinely is. All the literature backs this up. It is seen as so incredibly attractive, okay, to men when women are responsible with money. Fiscal responsibility is unbelievably attractive, right? And in the US and certainly in the overwhelming preponderance of Western countries, what you end up seeing is that money disputes, financial disputes, are the number one leading source not only of arguments, but number one reason for divorce. You want to make sure that you and your partner are on the same page there, okay? So those are the three fundamental needs that women have that men, you guys can focus on. And ladies, those are the three that men have that you can focus on. And remember, there's proxies for absolutely everything. For example, ladies, if you talk about building a budget and these sorts of things, your guy is probably going to find that attractive, right? Especially if he has, similar focus in terms of he prefers saving, etc. Now that, of course, can be completely overdone as well. He could, be a total cheapskate. But usually guys are going to find it attractive that, you actually think about money, right? In some capacity, in some responsible capacity is quite attractive, right? So there's all kinds of proxies here as well that you can follow. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining me for this discussion today. As always, I appreciate the blessing of you taking the time out of your day to be able to spend it with me. As I mentioned earlier, if you are interested in seeing more of our videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell so you get notifications when we post new content. Share this video with your friends as well as with your congregation. If you're interested in having me come to your place of worship to be able to speak, it would be a pleasure to discuss that with you. Or if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, regardless of where you are in your journey, if you are, newly single, if you are in a relationship, if you have been married for 20 years, I've worked with everybody, and it'd be a pleasure to work with you as well. And you can go ahead and contact me via the website below and we can chat further. But for today, I'm signing off. God bless you, and remember to get out there, take chances, and be your best self. See you in the next one. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed that episode and you'd like to see more original content, then please do click on one of the links right here. I hope to see you in the next one.